Manistee City Council work session for Tuesday, July 10, 2018 at 7 p.m. is now called to order. Work session items. We'll have public comments on work session related items, discussion on non-union DC pension plans, discussion on MEDC redevelopment services, and a discussion on River Street refuge pickup. Are there any citizens that wish to comment on agenda-related items?
Mayor, one question. Could we get MEDC before?
MEDC will be before, will be the first item discussed.
All right, thank you.
Hello, Tyler Huffman, DDA Director. The board wanted me to come and address item D, discussion on River Street refuse pickup. So the board had 4 items that they want you to consider. One was changing the pickup dates from Monday and Thursday to Tuesday and Friday. The second was to require require containers, and then not allowing trash on River Street before 8 p.m. the day before trash pickup. And then the 4th item was a long-term goal of establishing garbage corrals. So, thank you.
Are there any other public comment? If not, we will move on to discussion on MEDC redevelopment services.
All right. Thank you. I think I need to Good evening, folks. My name is Nate Scramlin. I tried to introduce myself to everybody as they came in. If I missed you, I apologize. But just a little introduction on who we are. Again, I work for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. I don't know if you know Dan Leonard here. You may have seen his face before. He works more so here in the city. But he's on what's called the Community Assistance Team. I've also been on the Community Assistance Team at the MEDC for around 6 years. But we transitioned and started a new team. You folks are one of 24 communities in the state that are certified in the Redevelopment Ready Communities program. You guys are aware of that, right? You guys probably had a big certification event out here, right? So with that, you guys are really trying to prepare yourself to accept more redevelopment here in town. And now I've been tasked, I'm the manager of this redevelopment services team, and I've been tasked with a few staff members to focus specifically on some sites that the city has identified as a priority and try to really attract any kind of investment to those properties and redevelopment to those particular properties. We're here tonight to talk basically I'm going to talk a little bit about that redevelopment services, but really the idea here is, we're going to talk about some of the tools that we have at the MEDC to do redevelopment, as well as some of the things that the locals might be able to provide to help in some of those redevelopment of some of those sites. Myself, Jim Davis is also here. He's from our redevelopment services team. Sarah Rainero, she's director of the CAT team here at the MEDC. But probably about a month back, myself and Jim and Dan sat down with that, Denise and Tyler, talked about these particular sites, as well as Stacy from the chamber, because there's a developer day coming up on August 10th, if you guys are aware of that. But really, we wanted to prepare council, if you happen to be asked by anybody that's interested in some property. I mean, you folks are the people that are representing the community, right? And, any developer that may be coming into town, they may want to talk to you folks about what's going on. So we just wanted to make sure you guys are very aware of the tools that we have at the state, so you might be able to talk about those things, as well as some of the tools that you might be able to use locally. So this is really to provide intel to council on how some of these redevelopment deals can come together and how the MEDC can help. So again, we're with the Community Development Division at the MEDC, and we, if I get this thing to work, we're here. We generally try to help support growth and vibrancy in communities, specifically you'll see a lot of our work in community development centering around the traditional downtown areas or any kind of high-impact corridors. Talk a little bit more about that in a second. But this is the master puzzle that we're trying to put together. Right, we're placemakers. What we try to do is create an interesting, inviting place because we know that talent wants place. Right, we want to attract talented people. I know communities like yourself want to attract talented people because in those high places with high amounts of talent, businesses tend to locate there. You'll notice, some of the higher, larger businesses around the state that have moved in or that we haven't received have been based on that fact alone, whether or not there is talent there to provide workers for the jobs that they'll have open. So we're placemakers. We're trying to create place in your community. We're trying to help you guys accomplish that. So I'm going to walk through some of the incentives and financing tools that we have to do redevelopment projects in your community. First, let's talk about eligibility. Really, the tools that I'll be talking about should be focused in that downtown area or on a high impact corridor, as you can see here. So that's first and foremost, is there potentially a project in one of those areas? If there is, we then we'll talk through some of the other considerations that we vet and evaluate before we decide it's something that we want to provide some of our funds for. You'll see on the bottom there, and I apologize, it's a little small, I understand we've got some technical difficulties, but we've got some local and regional impact considerations to talk about those, some place considerations, as well as some economic and financial considerations. So local and regional impact, does the particular project that we're trying to support, does it support the vision of the community? Does it support the goals and vision that you have identified maybe in your local master plan or your economic development strategy? We want to be significantly increasing taxable value on a property. If it's just been lying there vacant for a number of years, every community's got a few of those properties around town. We want to attract investment to that piece of property to increase the taxable value. I would assume you guys probably all want that as well, right? Located in a Main Street community, that is not a requirement. Main Street is another technical assistance program that we have, but you'll notice I did bold the last one. Of course, we want all of the top three are things we want. The last one is a requirement, really, for any of our particular incentives. Any state incentive that MEDC's Community Development Division brings, we have to have some kind of local financial support to that particular project, which really sends the message to us that the city then is really, this is a strong priority for that community, right? You're willing to put the eggs in the basket, we'll put our eggs in the basket, and we'll get the project done. Place considerations, when we're thinking about the type of project that we want to support with our tools. Mixed income, we like some low income, some market rate. We do all market rate projects as well. Mixed use, multi-story. You guys will notice that on River Street or any typical traditional downtown that you walk through. We're talking about that zero lot line, traditional style building. Mixed use, usually a commercial use on the first floor, number of stories of residential or office above, multi-story again. We want at least 2 stories. We appreciate density in those areas. Urban design is definitely something we're very concerned with. The materials of a particular building. We want strong, solid materials that are going to last. We're not big fans of vinyl, if you will. Significant brownfield activities. Many of these buildings may have been staying dormant for a number of years. Maybe some lead and asbestos, some environmental concerns, or maybe the building needs to be demolished. If we're taking care of some of those blighted situations, that's something we're very interested in. Green building, any kind of sustainable elements on the building. Sustainable stormwater. We're big historic preservationists too. You guys have a wonderful historic fabric in your downtown. Some of the buildings there have been preserved just incredibly well. I was in the Fillmore today, just having an iced tea before I came here. And I mean, the floor in there, you guys walked in there? I love it. I mean, that is a beautiful, beautiful project, beautiful building. So yeah, just some of the things that we consider when we're looking at a particular project. And then of course, it all boils down to the economics of a particular project, right? Anything that we support, we want to know that there's some kind of financial need for that incentive. You know, whether it's an infrastructure project or, you know, whether it's a redevelopment of a building here in town, we want to ensure that there is a financial need for that. We like to see that debt and equity are maximized on a particular project. That's Dan. Don't mind Dan over there. He's going to walk through an actual financial pro forma here in a little bit to kind of illustrate some of the things that I'm talking about here. But we want to make sure costs are reasonable. You know, when developers come into town and they develop a building, a lot of time developers charge a fee, right? We want to make sure they're deferring that fee and we're not paying for that thing up front, right? We want to make sure, you know, that's something that they get through the income of the property. We're not just going to drop some money in their pocket, right? We want to make sure, you know, the dollars that we're talking about, you know, whether it's a local contribution or if it's a contribution for the state, generally speaking, we're talking about tax dollars. And we want to be good stewards of that money, and we want to ensure that we're using only the amount needed to ensure that a particular project happens, right? And that's the limit, right? We don't want to over-incent any particular deal. So those are kind of the three lenses that we look through. You know, again, we've got local and regional impact. You know, is it a priority for the community? Is it the type of project and in the location that we want to support? And you know, is it economically feasible? And really, you know, then after we look through that lens, then we kind of move through our project evaluation. You know, Dan, like I said, is on the community assistance team, and he would be the person to come out if you had a particular interest. You know, maybe Thad would call Dan or Tyler or Denise and say, hey, we've got a developer interested in this building in downtown. It's been vacant for 10 years. They want to redevelop it. They've got a plan for doing that. So they'd call Dan up, and he would come out and do a scoping visit where, you know, he gets introduced to the project. And again, he looks through those lenses that I talked about earlier to say, is this the style of project that we're interested in? Is this something that we want to support? And then moving on to, you know, the project management, we have a number of documents that we have to receive to evaluate something, and then do an evaluation on the project. And if it is something that we do want to support, we would make an offer to somebody. And then, you know, eventually anything that we do has to be approved by our Michigan Strategic Fund Board, right? They're the controlling board, just like you folks are the controlling board of your local dollars. We have a board that controls, you know, our state dollars as well. So I'm going to briefly walk through. We've got 4 funding mechanisms that I'm going to talk about tonight. It's my understanding that I think you've used them all except for one, which we'll talk about later.
We'll talk about it.
Because it's an easy one. I mean, it's a no-brainer. But I'll talk about it in a second. So the first one is called the Michigan Community Revitalization Program, and really this is a gap funding mechanism for revitalization projects. We're talking about building revitalization and redevelopment of property. You know, it's a competitive program. There's only a set amount of dollars that we have to go to, you know, all the communities across the state. So it's competitive every year. It's need-based. Again, we want to see that there's a financial need on that particular property or that particular project. And Dan's going to talk all about the financial need here in a little bit. We're going to walk through, like I said, a pro forma to show, you know, how some of the different things can affect the need on a particular project. And performance-based. Anything that we do, you know, after you get approval, say developer gets approval from our MSF board to receive some of our grant funds, then the clock starts ticking. You know, we have performance measures that they have to hit and milestones that they have to hit, and if they don't hit them, then, you know, we'll start clawing the dollars back. So this program, again, it's an annual appropriation from our legislature. And really it boils down to, it's a financial tool. It's grants or loans to a particular project. We've got grants up to $1.5 million per our statute. Really, most of our grants kind of level off at the $750,000 mark, which is a policy that we have in-house. And then we can offer loans up to $10 million on any particular deal. But really, so we look at that particular project and we find that gap, and Dan's going to show you about the gap that I'm talking about, and say, okay, let's right size our incentive to ensure that that developer gets a reasonable return to do the project, because nobody's going to do a project if there's no return on it. That's never going to happen, unless it's I don't know the scenario one. But we kind of right size it, and we can support up to 25% of what we call eligible investment in a particular project. So that's eligible investment is really your hard construction costs. And any kind of architectural and engineering or environmental studies and things like that. So we come up with a number that says, okay, this is what eligible investment is. A typical project, we'll say it's $1 million project. Eligible investment of that project might be $700,000 or $800,000, we'll say. So we could support, up to $200,000 with a grant or a loan for that particular project. That's how that particular program works. It's a brownfield redevelopment project. Is everybody familiar with the legal term brownfield here in the state of Michigan? You have to qualify legally. A piece of property has to qualify to be a brownfield. Those property eligibility, those are the different ways it can qualify, if it's contaminated or if it's blighted, which is something that the city council deems so. Functionally obsolete is something that your city assessor would analyze the building and say, yes, this is functionally obsolete. If it's a historic resource, because probably have a historic district in downtown, so a number of those buildings could qualify for this program on that alone. Properties that are also adjacent and contiguous to parcels can be also eligible for the program. And remember, I talked about eligible investment. These are the things that make up, any of your construction costs, any demo, any engineer or furniture and fixtures, architectural engineering, things like that. Things that aren't included in there include acquisition taxes, insurance, any costs associated with any funding. So on to another program that we have is Brownfield Tax Increment Financing. In my opinion, we should have switched these around in the presentation, because we use this program first before we go on to offering grants for a project. This is our really the tool to remove any of the brownfield conditions that exist on a particular piece of property. Again, this is how a property can qualify for this particular program. A facility, which is the contamination, functionally obsolete, blighted, or historic. And really, how tax increment financing works, is everybody familiar with that tool? You guys used it here. Just a quick primer. Really, say there's a blighted property, and before development happens on that particular property, taxable value is frozen before anything happens. So anything at that level continues to flow to the city. Right? Any taxes paid on that property up to that level flows to the city. Then the development happens, and there's a taxable value has increased. So anything above that frozen value can be then funneled back to the developer to pay that person pay them back for any of these particular activities that they've done. Namely, usually the big ones are demo and lead and asbestos. That's available to any community across the state. If you're a core community, which Manistee is, you can also help pay the developer back for site preparation or infrastructure. You'll see this was used across where the condominiums, or the condos across the river over there. You guys are familiar with that project, some of the public infrastructure associated with that too. This is one of the incentives, one of the tools. So it uses both local taxes, and then you can come to the state for the state's portion of the taxes, another 24 mills that the state can put up towards that particular project. And again, we would evaluate any given project through those same lenses that I talked about earlier. Moving on to community development block grants. And by the way, if anybody has any questions, please ask me. I'm kind of I'm just cruising through these. I assume some of you folks have heard of these things before, but I I kind of want to get to more of the financial situation that we're going to talk about in a second. But community development block grants, that's a federal program that comes from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. We receive an annual allocation of about $30 million, and we dole that out to all of the communities across the state that are considered to be non-entitlement, if you're familiar with that word. Entitlement means you get a direct allocation from HUD, from the federal government. There's that's based on population, a number of other things. Manistee is not a non-entitlement community, so you don't get a direct allocation from the federal government. So you are eligible to use some of our funds. The project has to qualify through a national objective. Really, we're talking about assisting persons of low to moderate income, or removing blight, are two of the main ones that do that. You have used this program before. I think the Bluefish down the street utilized a grant from us for CDBG, and that was actually qualified through job creation to benefit persons of low to moderate income. So 51% of the jobs of the folks that were hired to basically run that restaurant were persons of low to moderate income. That project never would have happened if that was that grant was available, probably, as far as I know. So we also do infrastructure, small business support, kind of like I just described, mixed use rehabilitation, and really we can get creative on the number of things we do. I don't know if we've done a facade project here in Manistee. Have we done one? Can't remember.
Not in the last 5 years anyway.
Okay, there you go. Acquisition assistance, like I said, we did it, help them buy the building there at Bluefish. Blight elimination, anything associated with job creation and public infrastructure. So this is the one program that I said we haven't used here. This is kind of our new innovative crowdfunding tool that we use to activate public space. Now, Thad and I were walking, when we were here about a month ago, we were just walking through downtown. You guys got some great little pockets that really might be able to use this program to add some new flair to your downtown. That's it's up to you guys. It's a crowdfunding mechanism. It's really just we've developed this tool. It's a simple and innovative way to raise dollars to really reactivate a public space in your community. It's got the added benefit of engaging public participation and, of course, instilling community pride in that particular space. Talk a little bit about how that happens. Basically, a community or a nonprofit in any community that has that traditional downtown in the state can apply to us through our online crowdfunding. Patronissity is the platform, that's the word I was looking for. It's the platform that hosts it. I don't know if you're familiar with crowdfunding. Kickstarter, Indiegogo are some of the other tools that have been used, but basically, you put your idea up online, you promote it here locally, and you ask for donations to improve that particular space. So for every donation that you get, up to $50,000, we will match that 100%. You have to hit your goal to get your match, right? We've done a number of different projects across the state with this program. Right now, I felt like I just updated the slide. It said 147 projects in 75 communities across the state. I swear I just did that a month ago. But now we're at 159 projects that we've supported with the program, activating about 7.2 million square feet of new public space or reactivated public space in communities across the state. Through this tool, we've crowdfunded $5.8 million, and we've matched that with $4.9 million of our own grant funds to spruce up these spaces. And a lot of these projects are bigger than just a typical, $30,000 raise. You might raise $30,000 and then be matched with another 30 from us. That gives you 60, but that might be the last 60 you need in a $400,000 park improvement that maybe the city had brought, or maybe you received some DNR money to do that. So it can be part of a larger project. And I'd encourage you to talk to Dan a little bit further later on If you have some ideas, or if you have some space around town that you think, you might want to spruce up with this particular one. But it's really been a successful program. Everything that I just said is online. If you would like to visit our website, myplace.org, every program that I just described is on that website. I would encourage you to just tool around and take a look if you are familiar, if you aren't familiar. And, again, Dan Leonard, I'm going to mention his name again. If you want to just give him a call, he can talk you through it in about 5 minutes, most likely.
It's like the phone number that you get on a radio edition.
Yeah, 555. So that's my part of it. Again, I just wanted to familiarize everyone with some of the tools that we have available to help your community develop its sites. Again, this is kind of a ramp up as we approach this August 10th Developer Day, where the city will be hosting a number of developers from across the state to try to redevelop some of the properties that the community has identified as a priority. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan here, and he's going to walk through one of the main tools that we use to evaluate a project. It's called a pro forma. And it's got a whole bunch of numbers in it, but he's going to walk you through it and show you how it all works. Okay?
Can I ask you one
Yes,
question before
please,
we go?
please.
Under the
Riddle me.
Under the crowdfunding,
Yes.
and you mentioned MML and another organization, and then there was a 10% in there. Is there a fee?
We pay we pay Patronicity, that platform that I described. They're out of Detroit. They were a startup down there, and we pay them a 10% administration fee. We pay them. You don't have to pay for the fee. Yep, and they're experts. So if you even have an idea in your head that you want to do, I would encourage you to call them through our website, check it out, and give them a ring, and they can mold a project out of nowhere. We also can do that here in house, but they are very good at it. They are the professionals. That's why we pay them.
I think Manistee has been doing crowdfunding before we had this program though.
Most likely.
I mean, your Vogue Theater program, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you guys put together $1.2 million locally raised.
Right.
I mean, and that was not that long ago. And that was done by a nonprofit, if I recall. So these are also eligible activities that can come through not only local units of government, but also nonprofits.
Nonprofits. Yep. That's true.
Food for thought.
It's a great tool. Again, I don't want to hit it too hard, but like I mentioned, Kickstarter and Indiegogo and GoFundMe, those big time, those are nationally known websites that do crowdfunding. Generally speaking, the success rate there is about 30%. That's quality. We're at 99%. We've only failed 3 times out of 159. So it really does work. I would encourage you to take a look. All right, Dan? I'm going to move it over to you. And you're going to have to sit there. He's going to have to sit there because he's got to
You gotta drive a little
move.
bit.
You might want to zoom in on it, buddy.
It's gonna be, I was hoping that those work, we'll figure that out in the future.
They normally do the controls.
Got it. But basically, this is, and I hate to be too overwhelming, but this is a copy of our development and operating pro forma. This is an Excel spreadsheet, basically a large document. Are any of you into commercial lending at all, or lending in general? Any bankers in the room? Not yet. Okay. Well, hopefully in the future, when you want to become developers, we'll get to have this exercise. But fiscally, this is what we're charged with on a daily basis, is to review and work with your developers locally to identify, what that project looks like from a holistic financial projection. And I'm not talking about the business and how much it's going to make annually. We're looking at it from the auspice of an entire, operating building, from a commercial standpoint, from a residential standpoint, if they have parking, if they have any other income generation involved with that program or that property. We want to know about it. We want to reflect it in this model. This is basically an electronic format of a set of assumptions, financial projections, financial assumptions that we look at any given land or any given building and try to look into the future and say, this is what we're looking to get a return out of. This is how much we're going to have to invest. This is how much that, you know, the project can sustain from a debt standpoint. This is how much equity you're gonna have to put in. This is more, I mean, the true financial projection of what that deal looks like. So, many times, as Nate alluded to earlier, and every time that we get called to try and help, you know, fiscally fill a financial gap, I look to the locals as far as what type of skin in the game will you put in association with the state. And the goal this evening was kind of not to hopefully get too far in the weeds with this tool. The goal for this evening is just to kind of show you how some of the local as well as state programs that we offer affect financial deals. Many times it's lost in translation, and I deal with this a lot when, you know, you start talking about tax abatements or, you know, new units coming online and communities trying to put skin in the game, either through, you know, infrastructure that they're going to participate and put in via bond, or if they're actually going to become, and it's not totally uncommon, an equity investor in a deal. So that there are many different, you know, creative ways that communities can participate, but we wanted to kind of show you the typical deals that we come across. And for Manistee, I've put this together in an effort to try and make it similar. It's not perfect. Every building has its own challenges and, you know, fiscal stresses. However, this is just an example. This isn't anybody's building, don't worry. You know, we're not picking on anybody directly here. If anybody, I always like to pick on the east side of the state because I represent both northeast and northwest Michigan. But for tonight's purposes, we're going to focus on this deal. So in an effort of walking through it, this is, for better purposes, where we enter in all of the income assumptions. So basically we look at how many bedrooms are there. In this case, it's a roughly 2,400 square foot building on the residential side of the equation. So I've broken this up in 4 residential units. So think of, you know, the upper story of many of your large buildings in downtown. You know, today, that might be a little bit large, but not so uncommon. Many of your buildings here have a huge, deep footprint, very, very deep footprint. And there are many of them that have multiple storefronts that are still the same building. So square footage wise, this might not be too out of line. But effectively, we look at from a cost per square foot. In this case, we split up that 2,400 square foot into 4 units, 600 square feet each. We made an assumption of $1.42 per square foot of that residential space. So overall, monthly rent would look like $850 a month, which in Manistee is not terribly out of line. All of this type of data is what developers have to find and or commission. I'm sure you've seen that in many proposals that have come before you. Is, you know, who's going to live here? How much are they going to pay? There's a lot of due diligence into just coming up with that one number. But at the end of the day, it is kind of a gut check, if you will, in the market. And we have to compare a lot of different data to feel comfortable in bringing that product to market. So in this case, we're being very straightforward. We have 4 residential units upstairs, and we have assumed a vacancy rate as well. I didn't really want to get too far in the weeds as far as all the assumptions. But we look at square footage from a retail tenant as well. So this is our commercial section where we look at, again, 2,400 square foot is the footprint. We're charging in Manistee $12 a square foot. That ranges as well. You know, when you go to places like Traverse City, it's going to range anywhere between $25 and $32 a square foot, depending on where you're at. If you're right downtown on Front Street, it's tremendous. If you're out on 8th Street right now, you're probably going to pay about $18 a square feet. If you go up to Boyne City, it's typically $10 to $11 a square foot. If you go to Alpena, it's like $6. So every market is very different. In Manistee, in your world, I think $11, $12 a square foot is fair. Is it a little high? And we rely on our local DDA many times to kind of gut check these things. This is not uncommon. So we always get into kind of the back and forth. And to be honest with you, I don't care what that number is. You can tell me that it's $15 a square foot or $20, but my response is going to be prove it. And that'll come from the community, either reinforcing it through like a market analysis to show this is what we're getting, this is where we're getting it, this is why. Or you could say, hey, you know, our downtown existing footprints are all really, really tough, really dilapidated. I mean, when I've done deals in like downtown, I'm gonna pick on somebody, but like downtown Calcassia, their retail space in downtown is pretty tired. It's pretty tough. When you introduce a new product that doesn't exist, aka a brand new space, we're gonna have to charge and assume a little bit more per square foot, but we're also gonna ask that you identify who the tenant is that can support that increase to that market. So again, this is just a representation of kind of what we go through before we get that far. We're only in the revenue portion of the deal. So moving forward, under the next tab, this is where we get into our assumptions in regard to both the income. So this is a conglomerate. All the information kind of transfers through this whole sheet. This is a conglomerate of all our revenue assumptions from the first page. Transferring a little.
Zoom in a little. I don't know if you can.
Help me zoom in.
That plus sign down at the bottom right. See that okay?
This is how much. Thank you.
There it is.
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Is that better?
Yeah. There you go.
Okay. You guys probably have better eyes than me, so believe me. So in this case, this transfers all of the information from the previous tab to this to give you a broad representation of the income streams that we anticipate. For this deal, I've already made an assumption that we're participating locally in a couple different forms. In this case, we've dealt in an assumed tax increment financing revenue stream or reimbursement of $10,000 annually. We'll get to what that looks like later, but that is a form of local participation. Additionally, this is where our income comes against our operating expenses. So really, we're looking at this from the lens of a commercial lender. Does the revenue coming in support the future debt, which we'll get to lower on the screen, that we're going to ask for to renovate the space and accommodate these new units and this new tenant? So the operating expenses of the property don't necessarily have ties to, you know, if you're a restaurant buying, you know, produce or purchasing, you know, all of your fixtures and equipment. It has everything to do with taxes, operation of that space, snow plowing outside, any maintenance that has to be done, if there's an elevator, what goes into that. This is an opportunity to basically evaluate how much cash flow is left over at the end of the day from your revenue stream that your operating expenses are going to take out of it. And in this case, of course, I've built in a pretty low number, 22%. If this is a building that we're completely going through and it maybe wasn't in terrible shape to begin with, that's not a bad deal. It's not uncommon for us to see up to 30 to 35% of a property to be absorbing up to that amount of its annual income just in operating expenses alone. So what does that tell us? This number right here, this $58,000, is effectively what we have left over that will support the debt at the end of the day. So I know we're kind of doing banking 101 per se, but again, this is very important because when we start evaluating deals and we find out in most cases, especially in Manistee, it's going to cost much, much more than what the revenue stream coming in can actually support. So not uncommon, there's almost a gap built into a financial deal before they even get started. So in most cases, we're fighting an uphill battle to convince people to actually reinvest in these downtown properties because the costs are so high. Most of that is dependent upon the condition of the building itself, but it also has a condition of what's going on globally. I mean, right now, the cost of wood is tremendous. I don't know if any of you are in that market at all, but to purchase steel or wood, which are the two primary things that we build buildings out of, it's out of control right now. Construction costs in Traverse City have jumped. Typically, we've been doing deals around $200 to $220 a square foot. That's jumped up to about $250 to $280 right now. Manistee, even though you're a smaller town, your construction costs are not that dissimilar because of the access to labor. So guys are charging a significant premium to come into downtown to work on these projects rather than build the $1 million homes that, surround our coastline in northern Michigan. These are a lot of the challenges that we run into that affect deals. And so when we get into the weeds as far as how much will this property actually produce financially at the end of the day, this is very important because we want to know from a debt service standpoint how much that property can actually support without going, into the black more or less. We want these deals to be self-sustaining. The trick is that not over-incentivizing or under-incentivizing, frankly. So many times there are much more, negative characteristics to building when you start peeling off layers. When you start finding what's been covered up after that renovation from the 80s and the fire in the 40s. We did a deal in Boyne City, peeled back the interior of the roof and found that 3/4 of all of the beam supports that were all wood had a fire and was covered up. And we never even, you don't get into that minutia of it until you start doing a significant amount of due diligence. So this pro forma is a changing living document as well, depending on what you find. Any questions so far? Because I'm kind of running through this. The other assumption that I want to point out, though, is within these operating expenses, I also dealt in the local tax abatement of $10,000. So in this model, we are assuming that the real estate taxes today are $14,000. This is a pretty high example, but I wanted to just kind of show that jump and what happens. In this case, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because this number is very important. Typically, from a lender's eyes, as well as the MEDC, we want to see that projects are fiscally sound. We want to make sure that they can survive. And for every dollar that we have invested, we want to make sure that they have, $1.22 in revenue to basically offset, so that there's a buffer. If things go so well from a residential standpoint, maybe you have some vacancies, or maybe you lose a tenant in the commercial side and you have a few months where you're not collecting rent. We want there to be a little bit of a buffer built in. If you're at a 1.0 debt service coverage ratio, that means that every dollar that you're making is accounted for. You're probably not going to do that deal, and the lender is going to support you, unless you have a significant, stash of cash in the back that's going to offset that debt. But at the end of the day, this number is very important because this tells us that the project is fiscally, healthy, but also that a lender will get on board. So with these two assumptions in here, just in this simple portion, we haven't even got into the cost of the deal, but within just these two assumptions, if we take out the TIF reimbursements, so let's say that the community was not supportive of doing a brownfield plan for whatever reason, and in many of my northern Michigan communities, they don't even use that tool. They haven't activated their BRA for many years, it's just sat dormant, or they've never formed one to begin with. Fortunately, you have a very active one. But this is just as an example to show what happens. So if we zero that out, I think alone, from a brownfield standpoint, and very early into this deal, it will show us that this project gets very, very tight. So right out of the gate, that's how much like one small change can make for a development performance. I don't want to say that. Additionally, I've kind of crafted this to do the same thing, but some communities are more comfortable with brownfields than they are with any other tool, or maybe they just have never used another tool. In Traverse City, right now, they use brownfield almost every time. If you say things like an obsolete property rehabilitation act, which is a tax abatement program, or neighborhood enterprise zone, which is another local program, they're not really familiar with them. They haven't really structured how they would want to use them or what the benefits are. We're just starting conversations in that community and many as to why we would participate and or at what level. It's not like we ask you to give away the farm. And it's not uncommon for communities like City of Alpena actually does a really good job. They structure any participation that they have in a deal fiscally based on the private investment that comes into that town. It's very black and white. They don't want this to be, a huge negotiation every time, so they've kind of crafted rules towards what they will do and why they will use that tool. For us, this is kind of a little bit of a elevated example, but nonetheless, you can see how, the addition of multiple sources can really stack up and affect fiscally financial projects. So I want to kind of get out of the weeds a little bit. That was the really in-depth portion of it. But just to kind of give you the, ballpark picture of what the project could actually look like.
Gotcha.
Yeah, this is way out too. Between mouses. It's getting there. That's better. Okay, so in this form, this will show us what the actual costs are affiliated with this project. Okay, so it factors in a multitude of things. In this scenario, we're saying, which is not uncommon, that the landowner already owns the property. They own the building or they own the land. And so we do not assume that there's any cost with that. Most cases there are. Basically every deal that I've worked on in Manistee, there's been an acquisition price that's been built into here. Because it's a real cost they have to assume. So we want to reflect that. Moving down, this is where you're going to see all of the eligible activities Nate was talking about kind of be expounded upon. When we get into public infrastructure, site improvements, demolition, we can go through the whole list. But this upper portion of hard costs right there, that $200K is what I figured in this scenario is what we were going to do. We were going to, from a local standpoint, support $200,000 of eligible activities to use in the form of a brownfield incentive. So in this case, the eligible activities would be site prep improvements. So this could be sidewalks and rain gardens on site, you name it, burying power lines. In addition to, we'll say that they had a significant amount of lead asbestos abatement. So between those two, those would be the eligible activities that the brownfield TIF dollars would be paying for. Does that make sense to everybody? Just as that one little portion. And the reason I put that in there is because it's not uncommon for brownfield plans. If you remember back from the previous page, we had a $10,000 increase in taxable value that was going to go towards these eligible activities. So in this case, this is a 20-year brownfield plan. So every year, that $10,000 increase would then go back to the developer for doing these eligible activities. That's kind of your brownfield 101 mixed into all of this.
Right, the city would still get that 4,000, right? Because it was at 14,000, the increment was 10. So the city always gets the 4, but you're funneling the extra 10 that you got because of the development back to the developer until that 200,000 is paid off, which would take 20 years to see.
Okay, so even in this scenario, again, we're looking at a 4,800 square foot building, right? 2,400, 2,400 ballpark. And I might be a little bit high on my construction costs, but not too much. And I want to confirm that before I get too far. Sorry if I'm jumping around a little bit. You guys all become developers and work with me on it. You'll have this thing memorized as much as I do. Our construction costs right here are fairly elevated. I mean, it just showed $263 a square foot, which is pretty high. And again, I've seen that actually in Manistee. That number is not unrealistic. However, we also want to look at that number as an effort to say, whoa, you should maybe go back up to bid. That feels very elevated for what you're trying to do. Or are you putting in gold sinks and granite everywhere? It's that level of scrutiny a lot of times that will reflect the characteristics of each deal. So it's not uncommon for us to kind of go through this maze, if you will, to try and find different indicators to tell us the strength and the health or the rationale as to why a project needs our help or could become more efficient or could change throughout the course of the deal. In this case, we had an assumed total cost. Excuse me. a hard cost of $1.2 million, okay? So that's an all-in total cost for the actual construction that goes on with this deal. I did not put in any additional fees. You know, if you had a consultant that was helping you, you'd tailor that in as a soft cost. If you had a rent-up reserve, if you had, say, 60 units coming into town, you might not fill all 60 tomorrow. You may fill those over the course of 6 months, and you have multiple months built in to show that kind of ramping up of revenue stream. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to actually finance comes into our sources portion of it. This is where we identify all of our monies that will go into filling all of the uses, the construction costs, that are reflected on the other side of this document. So within the sources, you know, we've got an assumed total project cost, all in, of $1.265 million. So typically, and this is not uncommon, you know, we'll look to our local lenders to say, you know, how much can you bring? And the lenders will say, well, how much is the revenue going to support? So I literally backed into this number based upon what the project could support fiscally. Before I even got into the equity portion of it, I wanted to see what this project from a debt service coverage ratio standpoint could support. 575, we're going to jump back over, we'll come back to it. The loan over here at $575,000, which you can insert, you know, bank X, we always want to know who it is. And this is just a typical deal. 20-year mortgage, 5.5%, which is pretty much on par with what's going on right now. Depends on who you are and what you're trying to do. I've seen some of them as low as 5. I've seen some of them up around 6.5, 7. Just depends on who you are, what your financial stake is, and how strong that project is. So in this case, we kind of went in the middle of the road. And at the end of the day, you know, based upon our revenues that we had before, our cash service that's left over after the operating costs, this 1.2 is a strong deal. That is okay. It should be fiscally sound based upon this amount of debt. However, when you consider the total amount of 1.2 or 1.3, that's only 45% of the capital stack here. So right out of the gate, you know, that's how much the project fiscally can support. We still have to find, you know, a significant portion of this, you know, roughly $700,000 we have to find somewhere else. It's not uncommon for us to require a minimum of a 10% equity stream, cash, that's going to be represented in a deal from a developer to show that they are actually invested in this project. So we ask of them to either, A, if they own the building outright, do you have any debt on it? Most cases, a lot of downtown buildings don't. Many downtown buildings, they've been paid for a while. And there's a value associated with that. So have you looked at, you know, an appraisal? Would a bank actually want to lend against that asset? So in this case, I use the example of them actually, you know, assuming $150,000 worth in that project. Additionally, I asked them to pony up $75,000 of hard cash. The reason is because that's what I have left over after I plugged every single financial hole I could find, and I needed them to come up with more equity to actually make this deal work. So what is the MEDC going to come in for? Well, as Nate talked about, we can only come in at a maximum of 25% of your eligible investment using our state resources, our community revitalization program. So in this case, we assume that this is a historic asset, and we also assume that, you know, we're going to come in at, say, 20%. So $253,000 is the max that we can bring to the table. Additionally, this is a resource that a lot of times we get asked about because folks just don't know about it. And it's nothing that, you know, communities typically, you know, market, because this is more of a taxation question for, you know, an actual real estate attorney or even an accountant for that matter. But historic tax credits are a form of equity. And if it's a historic structure, we typically ask that that be considered as, you know, a contributing factor in the capital stack. So many times when we're actually diving into these, we'll kind of uncover different forms of equity for developers and say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And we'll a lot of times unearth many other tools that are out there that maybe they're not so aware of to help shrink that gap. So in this case, Tyler came to bat for us in a big way. I don't even know how high your DDA can come in with the side grants, but I'm hoping in this case it's $42,000. And honestly, in many cases, that is not uncommon. That is a great, local program. You guys have had it for a long time. It's been very successful, and you can see it downtown. Many of your businesses have utilized that tool, and it's a good way. It's an easy way for us to show local skin in the game as well. So that, even though it comes from the DDA, is still a form of local contribution. It's very important for us to realize. So all in with the MEDC at 20%. And all of the different various tools that we've just talked about, this is kind of the tough nut to swallow, or the tough nut to crack, is the sales pitch on convincing a developer to do all of this due diligence for a 7% return in this case. And that's basically leveraging the community and your, tools that you have available, the MEDC, maxing out the tools that we have available, and these are not uncommon. In many deals in northern Michigan, they're fairly skinny. In many instances, we push back. When we hit around the 12 to 13, 14, 15% returns, we get a little squeamish a bit because that's a pretty savvy deal. Most of the time, we'll see equity investors come in and they'll jump on board with a 20% return all day long. But to go less than that, most of the time they're not very interested. So there's always a negotiation in there between the quality of the property, the quality of the project, the impacts that it has locally, and how much we bring to facilitate making that project actually happen. Because that's really what these dollars are for. They're not a generosity piece, and they're certainly not just an open checkbook. Although we do get accused of having big checks in our trunk as we drive around the state, it is something that that's very fiscally reviewed, and by multiple parties as well. So again, this may be a little bit of an extreme example, but this is a reality of why it's very important from a local standpoint to understand what tools are available to you to help make really challenging real estate deals effective and work. Because even though it may sound like a small thing locally, putting out an abatement or participating in a brownfield plan or what have you, it can totally change the dynamics of the deal and make it feasible now. Not even going to get into cash flow. I feel like we've gotten the point across. But I just want to say in closing, it's, I think working with the community and moving forward, both Nate and his team is going to do, I believe, a really good job of trying to help Thad and Tyler and the community in general turn over those sites. I'm going to get looped in basically throughout the entirety of the process, but just know that we're here to kind of help facilitate the discussion. We'll get into the weeds with individual developers, but I think moving forward, as we talk about the MEDC partnering with the city, we really will encourage some other investigation, and if we need to flush out even more ways as to how all of these local tools work and what really are some other thresholds, we can do that as well. So this was just hopefully to be an exercise to kind of shed some light on what we go through and what developers go through, frankly, on a regular basis.
Just a shade under an hour too. So hopefully that was beneficial. And again, any questions that you guys have for us, by all means, let us have it. Or if not now, you can follow up with Dan and myself. The mayor has my card. Thad and Tyler and Denise all have my contact information as well.
I think it's a lot of detailed information, but I'm going to have to say, you sit up here on city council, sometimes you get a plan for brownfield redevelopment, or we approve a CDBG grant, and such. There's a great deal of detail that is not presented at the same time. People up here are making decisions on very convinced data and information, and things like this are really important for people to understand. There's a lot of thought and process in this. I kind of look at it like a mortgage. When I go to get a mortgage, they want to know how much money I've got. to pay the
Yeah,
mortgage.
can I pay the bill? Right,
How
that's
much debt
exactly
I've got, and all this. But at the same hand, if I'm a little short, someone's not going to cut my taxes so I can make my payment. You know, there's a lot of consideration when you're looking at economic development in a community versus residential and some of those other aspects. It would be nice to have a sample performer for people to look at. I'll be honest with you, I can't read the figures from here.
Sure.
But and you know, somebody
We have the performance available on our website actually, and we have honestly a step-by-step guide how to fill out every single box in there, which is not as daunting as it seems here.
Right.
And you know, it would be easy enough to just pull it up and just kind of fool around with it, even on your own if you want to, or you know, we can dive back into it later with any folks that are interested in that too.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for the opportunity.
Next up, Mr. Bradford.
Thanks, everyone.
So, we did a presentation at the last work session in June about some of the ways that we could move forward with the DC plan if we wanted to do away with the DD plan for the management. And then some council members had some questions about what that would really look like on paper. So I'm going to run through a short PowerPoint presentation. Some of it's a little bit of repeat from last week, just to bring everybody onto the same page. And then I've got a spreadsheet that I put together that I'll put up on the screen, and I can talk you through it, and that may help answer some of the questions that council has. So again, we're a member of the Municipal Employees Retirement System, MERS, and it's the largest public sector retirement provider in Michigan, one of the largest in the nation. We joined in 2005. We transitioned to them from our city-operated plan. We also previously had a city contributory plan as well. The current non-union benefit, and that's the division that we're talking about, they have a 2% multiplier. So for every year of service, you get 2% of your final average compensation. 60 years with 10 years of service as your normal retirement. There's also a 55 years of age and 30 years of service as an early retirement rider. The final average compensation, which is one of the key components of the benefit multiplier, is 5 years. So your 5 highest years of wages are what they base it on average. They actually look at it on a month-by-month basis, so it's the 60 highest months, what they call an FAC 5. Employees contribute 4% for that benefit. So as an example of how that would be calculated, and this is just an example, if you had 30 years of service, at that 2% multiplier, that gets you to 60%, 2% per year. And then if your final average compensation happened to be $50,000, then you would have an annual pension of $30,000. And that's assuming that it's a single individual and they're taking it as a, that's the maximum it would be. If they were married and they wanted to take that payout, there are several different ways they can do that, but it reduces it. So for instance, if I had a spouse that was maybe a little bit younger than I would be, there's a table that reduces that amount of your pension because actuarially your wife is probably going to outlive you, so when you die, your wife would continue to get that benefit. But this would be what it would be if you just took it as a straight life as a single person. Currently in the system, in this division, we have 13 retirees, and their average pension annually is $18,600 per year. Some of those people retired quite a while ago. Obviously salaries have grown since then, but that's the current status of that. We also have I think it's 5 deferred vested people, which are people that are vested in the pension plan but have left employment, and their average pension will be about that same amount, a little over $18,000. And then there's, I believe, 13 active members right now. This slide shows what the costs are for that non-union pension. The pie chart on the left shows that we have an actuarially accrued liability of about 8.85% of payroll. And then our normal ongoing cost is 9.85%. So if you were to start this pension plan up today from scratch, the city would be paying just under 10% for normal cost. Now, all that normal cost, we get 4 of that gets charged to the employees. They contribute 4%, and the city does 5%. So almost half of what the pension costs are right now in this division are for the actuarially accrued liability. And that results from primarily pension or investment results that haven't kept up with what the actuarial assumption is. There's other things that impact that, such as longevity and things of that nature, but it's primarily related to investment returns. So City Council did ask staff to look into switching from a DB to a DC plan. And we did ask MERS to look at that. And I presented this last week, but I'm going to run through it again quickly. When you do that, the unfunded accrued liability is amortized over a 20-year period, so that impacts what the city would be paying. And they do a study that uses the same actuarial methods that they do when they are calculating what our annual contributions are. We took a look and compared that to what the baseline, just continuing with the defined benefit plan that we currently have is, against closing that division to new hires and introducing a 7% city contribution to a defined contribution plan. And this chart shows what those costs will be. The baseline is that first shaded column. When you close a defined benefit plan, you still have liabilities out there. You have all the people that are currently retired, and you have all the people that are going to retire under that plan when you close it to new hires. So they accelerate your funding a little bit, and they try to get that down over that time period. So the first shaded column shows that those costs will just kind of grow over time and settle out until you get to at which time the unfunded liability for the current plan in theory would be paid off, and then you would just revert back to the normal cost. If you close that plan to new hires, then you have a combination of costs. You still have to pay costs for the DB plan for the people that are in the plan currently, but then you also now have a contribution to a DC plan for new hires. So if you look at the yellow column, that shows the total annual employer contribution, being the sum of both of those. And for the first 18 or 19 years, the cost of the closing the plan to new hires and having a defined contribution plan is a little bit higher than what it would be if you just stayed with the MERS plan currently. In 2035, 6, and 7, you have a huge drop off, and you save almost $200,000 a year. And then moving forward past that point, the cost of the defined contribution plan is slightly higher than what the DB plan would be. Overall, there's a $30,000 difference over that 20-year time frame. So what this really shows you is that you can reduce your liability moving forward, because as soon as you close a plan to new hires, you're not generating any more liability there on those people that would normally have that plan. However, depending on how the plan performs for the people that are still in it, you do have a liability. It could go up or it could go down based on investment results. And that plan is going to continue until that last person dies. That could be 50 years from now. So by closing it to new hires, you're not really closing the plan, but you are limiting future liability on any new hires. We went through this last week. This chart shows the same thing, just in a bar graph. And you can see that the yellow, which is the proposed DC, does slightly exceed the existing pension plan, again, for about 20 years. Then it drops off, and then moving forward, assuming everything met actuarial assumptions, it would be slightly higher. So we went over that last week. Then the question was asked, well, what does it really look like in practice? You know, what does the retirement look like, and how would that work out? So I've got a spreadsheet that I'll show you after we finish these slides, but we'll take a hypothetical example of an name Sally Smith. If she was hired at 30, works for 30 years, and retired at age 60, and then draws a pension for 25 years, what would that look like? And that would give her an annual pension of about $43,000. The city doesn't have any cost of living adjustments on its pension, so what you get in your first year of retirement is what you get in year 25 of your retirement. That has saved the city a lot of money, because a lot of defined benefit pension plans do have some kind of a COLA, and those get rather pricey. One thing to keep in mind is that in the non-union division, that hired at age 30 that I have built into this model is probably a little low. I think the last 2 or 3 hires that we made in that division have been older than 30. That's probably a more accurate number for maybe people that are hiring into the steelworkers division. But I needed to start somewhere, so that's what we assumed. It gives you a nice 30-year time window before somebody would retire. And then I looked at what it would do if you had a defined contribution for a hypothetical employee, and I wanted to see what it would look like to get a similar benefit. So if you had the same worker hired at 30, works for 30 years, retired at age 60, and draws out of his contribution plan for 25 years, in order to make that look like what our defined benefit plan would offer, you'd have to have a city contribution of 7% and an employee contribution of 7%. So a total of about 14%. And a rate of return while working, I assumed, is about 7.5%, which is slightly lower than what MERS assumes. And the reason for that is studies have shown that professionally managed funds typically outperform 401ks and that type of stuff by a little bit. So that took a quarter point off. It's actually probably more than that in reality. And then a 4% rate of return was assumed in retirement because people they changed their asset allocations to a safer bundle because they don't want to expose those to market risk. That would also equate to an annual payment of about $43,268. So what I did, and I'm going to zoom this up a little bit too, is model what that would look like. So in this scenario, if you look at the columns on the left here, it shows what the salary goes up. You have a 2.5% inflation that I assume, 7.5% rate of return, and then if you use the pension model here, this is where you come up with that $43,268 pension. If somebody is contributing on the right side here to a 401, not a 401k, but like a 457 or a defined contribution plan, they put in money, the employer puts in money, it's invested, it earns a rate of return, and it continues to grow over time. In this model, we just assumed a flat 7.5% rate of return for the whole 30-year work history, and then 4% at retirement. And as you can see, if you draw the same amount of money out, at age 85, which is when I assume the individual dies, it shows a little bit of a negative, but basically it's a wash. So into this scenario, somebody would be roughly indifferent to those types of plans. And it's about $1.12 million over the retirement time period of that 25 years that's paid out either through a pension or this. So what would happen if you had a little bit lower rate of return in the defined contribution plan? Your defined benefit plan is still going to produce this $43,268 a year pension. But if you change that rate of return to 6.5% instead of 7.5%, then when you're 79, you run out of money. If you were trying to draw that same $43,268. So in order to zero your account out at 85 and not run out of money, you'd have to reduce your amount down to about $36,000. One of the things to keep in mind here is if you look at these percentages on the right, those are the burn rate, or the amount of withdrawal that you're taking out of that fund every year, about 7%. Typically people in the investment business suggest that you take out about 4% a year. the 4% a year in this scenario doesn't get you your 43,000. So I was trying to equalize the benefit that you would get. Now, on the flip side of that, I'm going to go to the next tab here. If you have higher rates of return, in this case, 1 percentage point, 8.5% instead of 7.5%, if you come down here, you can still draw out your $43,000 a year. But at the end, you have a nice little nest egg left over that you can give to your heirs. So 1 percentage point of investment makes a huge difference. And that's the same thing with our defined benefit plan. 1 percentage point here that makes a really big difference in what the city contribution would be and what our unfunded accrued liability is. Now, in all three of those scenarios, I didn't assume any downturn. I just assumed the long-term average rate of return for investments. But downturns happen, and they happen fairly frequently. We've been in one of the longest expansions that we've had. We haven't had a recession. The markets have been positive for more than the last 10 years. They were flat in there a couple of years. But if you had a more typical scenario where you would have a downturn in the markets every few years, like every 6 years, you typically will get a recession or a downturn. When I modeled this, I said, what would happen to somebody if they were going to retire and you had, not a super deep recession downturn in the market, but a 15% downturn in 1 year? That's happened. That happens fairly frequently. And that really does impact what you're going to be able to do here. In that scenario, you only have money until you're 77. Again, drawing this $43,000 a year out. In that case, you would have to adjust it down to about $34,000 a year if you wanted it to last. The big takeaway in all this is you can tweak these numbers all day. You can raise the rate of return. You can make the numbers do a lot of different things. So you need to look at multiple scenarios to see what makes sense. But the thing to keep in mind is the primary thing that a defined benefit plan and a defined contribution plan does is it shifts the risk from the employer, shifts the investment risk from the employer to the employee. I mean, that's the 10,000-foot view. That's a nutshell. And that's what a lot of places have done. I mean, in the private sector, defined benefit pension plans have been closed down right and left, and there are not many of those left. In the public sector, it hasn't happened as much. There's still a lot of defined benefit plans. So in a case like this where you would have a downturn, the employer would have, or the employee, if they were worried about that, would have to probably put away, more than 7% of their salary in order to try to mitigate that loss of risk. And a lot of it isn't so much that recessions happen, because you can weather out recessions if they happen early enough in your career. But in order to really make this type of a plan work, you have to have a long investment horizon, first of all. And you have to have good timing. You can't have a recession that happens right before you're getting ready to retire. And what happens when that does happen is a lot of people will work longer than they otherwise would. And there's pros and cons to that. You retain that experience of those employees. Sometimes, though, you have morale issues because those employees really would like to retire, but they can't afford to do it. So there's pros and cons with that. And again, a lot of it has to do with the timing. Another thing which we mentioned last week is, at least in the public sector, in order to attract and retain people coming in, they like to see that defined benefit plan. I'll give an example. Chief Kozel, who's not here tonight, I've talked to him, and he said one of the things that was really attractive to come to Manistee is that we still have a defined benefit pension plan. And if we didn't, he might not have come here, he might not have considered it as strongly. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's not saying that it's going to scare everybody away, but that is something to consider when you're looking for those types of things. And you do need, in order to make this kind of a system work, you do need a long time in the market, because the power of compound interest is very strong. And you have to have time for those accumulated earnings to continue to earn in order to get up enough money to be able to do it. On the flip side of that, though, if you close the DB plan to new hires, you eliminate any future city liability beyond what you're going to match for those new hires. And over time, eventually, 50 years from now or 40 years from now, when that pension plan was all gone and everybody's drawn the last penny out of it, there won't be any more unfunded liabilities for the city for that particular division. So I just wanted to show some examples of this. Again, you can tweak these numbers. There's lots of calculators online, but that's one way of looking at it. So I don't know if you've got any questions about this or the presentation I did last week. Sure.
When we're talking about defined benefits, and I worry about our unfunded liability, it seems like we have no control over that. The market kind of controls that. And we And what I've researched to this point, we're not getting even. We keep continually going behind. Where are we at now, about 400,000?
Yeah, I don't have the latest.
I think we're around
Are you talking about this
400,000,
particular?
fast approaching 600,000.
Are you talking about this particular
Cost.
division?
I'm sorry.
Cost,
Yeah.
not unfunded liability.
No, the cost for this division is about $120,000 a year.
Is what?
The cost that we pay annually for this division, not citywide, this division. is about
Okay, but you know,
$120,000 a
we
year.
talk overall and then we talk division. So why don't we keep it in one conversation?
Well, I think we have to make that distinction because we're talking just about this division going
Yes.
to a DC, so we have
But
to
to
give
your
it
point, Mayor Pro
perspective.
Tem Zelinski, you know, about 70% of the actuarial calculation is the investment return. It's a huge piece of it. So if you don't meet that actuarial assumption on a long-term basis, then you're going to drive up your costs. And that's what happened because of those huge losses that the fund had in 2008. They're still working those losses through. Some of the gains that we've had recently haven't worked through. But yeah, I'm not gonna dispute that point. Absolutely, a lot of it is tied to your investment
I
performance.
guess I'm looking for an end or something, wanting to get in my head, and I think a lot about, when do we break even? When do we keep spending more money on our retirements?
Well,
Because every time we increase that cost, we have to, we don't have money just growing on trees.
Right, so I agree we don't have money growing on trees. I agree the pension costs are going up across all divisions. But keep in mind, on a DC plan, unless you're gonna reduce the amount of percentage match that the city does, or you're gonna not have salary increases, your costs are gonna go up there as well. Because as salaries rise, so does your match in a DC plan. Now, it may not be going up at the same rate, right, because the employee is taking the risk, not the employer, but those numbers are still gonna go up. You know, if I have a payroll of $100,000 with a 7% city contribution, that's a $7,000 contribution. You know, 10 years from now, when that payroll is $200,000, it's gonna be a $14,000 contribution. So it does go up unless that changes. It just may not go up at the same rate as the DB plan goes up.
It's a fixed cost. It's a predictable cost based on inflation and salary. When we went into MERS in 2005, we were funded 108%. The MERS individual came in here and gave us a presentation, and they intentionally, I'm not going to say undercharged or charged a lower rate to draw us down to 100% from that 108%. When they did that, we started off $22,500 cost for MERS, and everybody's tooting and on, and it's a great program, saved us $70,000. This year, I believe it's in the budget for $418,000 overall cost for MERS. I believe the projections show us almost bumping against $600,000 here in the next couple of years for MERS. But at the same time, what's our unfunded liability? We hit pretty close to $4 million in unfunded liability at one time. I think it came down a little bit, but the variation between departments, and I think that's interesting. The steel workers have pretty much self-funded their MERS contributions, and the cities contributed very little to their cost for retirement. When on the other hand, we're 28% of salary for IAFF this year. The department we're talking about was over 10% this year. It's either 11 or 13% city contribution this year for the non-union group of people. Those things keep growing up, and they're big bumps. I mean, there's a big difference between 22,500 and 400,000. That's the biggest growth category in the budget we've got into.
And I'm not going to dispute any of that, and I'm not trying to advocate one way or another on this. I'm just presenting the facts. I do want to make a couple of clarifications. Had we stayed with our old pension plan, which had a less aggressive investment allocation and had a smaller return, you would have experienced the exact same increases. So we really did save money. I shouldn't say the exact same. You would have experienced similar increases in cost. Staying with our old pension plan and the old pension advisor wouldn't have been a magic bullet. So the city did save hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that it otherwise wouldn't have by going from that to MERS. So though, I mean, those are real dollars that are saved. I'm not disputing that those numbers have gone up, but they would have gone up under the old system as well. So I think the question that the council posed was they wanted to see what a retirement for a city employee might look like under the defined benefit plan, what those costs might be, what it might look like under a DC plan, what those costs might be. And I guess the point to take away here is the benefit to the employee under a DC plan. As everybody who's in a 401k knows, as I used to be in a 401k, I understand that there's a risk factor there that the employees have to take, and that's the way that the world's going. There's no doubt about that. But when you put it on paper and look at it, it's kind of a stark comparison as to what that is. So it's really a policy decision. It will drive up costs according to MERS. Again, assume, making sure all those assumptions are met in the short term. For that first 15 to 20 years, it's going to be higher according to their calculations. Now, if their investments do better or worse, those could change, but based on the data that they gave us. And then after that, it drops off for a few years, and then it's higher, but you get rid of some of that liability. So it's really kind of a policy decision.
So what you're saying is if we change, we're looking for future generations down the road. And I want to make this simple in my mind. If we continue the way we are, and retirement costs keep going up, and we have to continue contributing more, not only for our pension costs, but our unfunded liability, that takes away from the services that we supply. Is that right? Eventually, we got to come up with the money.
We have to find that money somewhere, correct?
We got to find that money somewhere, or cut services, or lay people off, or do that type of thing. Just reassure me that's right.
It's right, and you'll pay more. You'll pay more for the next 18 to 20 years than you otherwise would have, according to MERS calculations. Not Ed Bradford's calculations, MERS calculations.
We're not going to pay significantly more.
Well,
And we're going to, at a point, eliminate our unfunded liability.
You will absolutely do that, but you will be paying. Let me go back to that slide.
Because the unfunded liability is not in those figures.
I think the point Ed's making is that there's going to be a higher cost
Up front.
to get rid of that unfunded liability, and the higher upfront cost, I think, is the first 15 to 18 years. It takes a dive for about 3 and then comes back up. So, I just want to make sure council understands that it's not saving money in the next 25 years, but it is reducing your liability.
And how much was that increase?
It's on this slide right here. You
Can't see it.
I can't see it.
Nobody can see
All
it.
right, let me zoom in more.
You can't read that.
You can't read these things. so.
That was in the presentation that was last week, or last month, but is that a little better? Can you see that last column?
No,
I'll keep zooming out.
you can't.
Dr. Hamlin.
I need a
Can you
magnifying
email that
glass.
to all of us and we can read it off our iPhones and it's.
Yeah, we can, yeah.
So, in year one, it's minimal, it's $2,500 more, according to MERS. Then it's $5,600 more the next year, and then $10,500, and then $17,000, and $18,500, and then $20,000, and $21,600, and then $23,300, and then $25,000, and $26,000, $27,000, $29,000, et cetera, up until it's $40,000 more. Then, once you've paid off the unfunded accrued liability, because that's really what these additional payments are saying. That's what this is saying at a level. The city's paying more to pay off its unfunded accrued liability. Then those drop off in the next 3 years because we paid them off. And then it starts to go back up again based because there's a lot more people in the new plan and you've got what the payroll. So I just want to reiterate something that Tony Reginovich said. The only way you pay off an unfunded accrued liability is to have better investment returns, people die sooner, or you pay more up now earlier so that money can go to work for you. So that's really all you're doing here. You're paying off that unfunded accrued liability one way or another. That's what they force you to do it when you close a division in Empire. So that's why you're paying more. I mean, that makes sense, right? You want to get that liability paid down. So that's what this is kind of demonstrating.
I ran a spreadsheet. I've got it on memory drive. I've got some big printed versions of it. I used some different assumptions than you did, Mr. Bradford, and I think the reason for that, as you pointed out, 1% or 0.5% over a number of years makes a significant difference in returns and the payouts. I looked at defined contribution and said, modeled it kind of after the state program where they'll contribute up to 8%. You get 3% whether you contribute anything at all. They'll match the next 3% you put in dollar for dollar, and they'll match the next 4% you put in 50 cents on the dollar. So you could get 15% for 7%, you know, from the employee. If you look at returns, I use the 6%, 7%, and 8%, so we're half points off and stuff. I ran it out 35 years, 40 years. I looked at the 5-year average. I've got in information, but when you look at the typical market return of 7%, and that's the historic average, and there's ups and downs. There's never been a 10-year period where the market has been negative. Yes, the liability or the onus for retirement is on the individual, but when I worked for the state of Michigan, State Street Finance, I had an online account. I could get online, I could change the balance, I could move to more futures, I could move to more overseas, I could make it more conservative, I could make it more aggressive. I had control of that money. When I left the state of Michigan, that $48,000 went with me that I had in the system in 3 years. Mine to roll over into another IRA or do whatever, with tax implications. I think the thing here that I see is an opportunity for people to accumulate a significant amount of resources over a period of time under their control. I'm not sure what MERS does as a management entity, for a defined contribution program. I'm familiar with investments, and I'm familiar with the state group finance that I work for the state. But I say, when the state went to defined contribution, they didn't suffer for people wanting to work for the state. That didn't hurt their recruitment and employment a bit. People are much more mobile these days. They move and they want to move the resources with them and control their own resources and destiny. I think it's a win for a person. I also put an inflation factor. I did looked at a couple of things. This is, what if a person retires at age 60 after 35 years or 40 years, and wants a 2% cost of living increase themselves from their investment, and they continue to get 7% return on their investment, and they're pulling 4% out, per year assumption. Wow, it makes a significant difference. Like I see in mine for military retirement and Social Security. You get a little bump every year unless there's no inflation, and then you get nothing. But for me in the military, I have more than doubled my retirement income since I retired in 1991. It'd be a significant difference in my lifestyle if I was living under the same paycheck I got the first month after I retired.
No question about that, and our plan doesn't have a COLA because it would have been very
expensive.
Yeah. What we encourage employees to do is to fund their deferred compensation plan as well as their pension, and then they can use that to provide themselves with a COLA down the road, and that's one strategy. And again, I'm not trying to advocate for one thing. The council asks for additional information, we've tried to provide it. This is the data that we have, and at some point, council needs to make a policy decision on what they want to do, and if that decision is to go to a DC plan, then staff will, get the paperwork ready to do that, and if it's to stay with the DEP plan, we'll continue to be diligent in trying to control those costs.
So let me ask a question about if you work 15 years and you decide to move, what part of that, how much of that pension plan do you take with you?
So there's an 8-year vesting.
Okay, let's say you work 7 years.
Okay, so you get everything that you put back,
Just what you put in.
plus a small amount of interest, and I don't know what that rate is, but it's not huge. And then the city contributions stay in the plan and go towards everybody else.
If you were on a defined contribution program, you would take it all, right?
Yes, you take everything that's in your account, correct?
I have a couple of questions.
But that's the same thing in the DB plan. You're taking everything that you've contributed plus a small amount of interest. The earnings just aren't as great because the interest that pension plans pay isn't a market rate of return.
And I have a couple of questions on the defined contribution. Do you have any numbers of what the fees would look like? I'm sure there's some fees for managing the
Well, it
accounts.
depends on who you have it, but both MERS and ICMA, who the city manager and myself would very strongly recommend we went with because it's already existing relationship, and in fact, we already have ICMA set up, it would be seamless. Their percentages are very low. Maybe even in the neighborhood of 50 basis points. I don't have the numbers right in front of me.
Is that's?
I didn't hear what you said, I'm
I said
sorry.
potentially as low as 50 basis points, so 0.5%, if that, for fees. They're low because they have huge scale.
Okay.
So for just conclusion, and to simplify it a little bit, so if we went with a DD, what would benefit? Would it be the city or the employee for short term? Who would benefit from those?
If we stayed with a DB plan, I'm not sure. Well, I mean,
So if we stayed, would the city benefit from it, or would the employee benefit from it, from a short term?
well, the city would be paying less for the first 20 years, again, according to MERS numbers. So the city would benefit, and I think, from my perspective as an employee, I like a defined benefit plan, and I think most people going into that would. Some would like it, some would like a DC plan because they like the portability. So that's really an individual decision.
Okay, so, and again, from a long-term stance, would
Well,
it benefit the
as the
employee
num-
or the city?
As the numbers showed, from a long-term stance, right here, you're paying more. Okay, you're gonna pay more 20 years out. The city is gonna pay more. But when you do that, you eliminate any chance that you have another 30% stock market decline, and then you have future liabilities. Okay, so it's a long-term thing. The city may be paying a little bit more than they would if they stayed in a DB plan, but again, you take the risk away from the city. So I'll come back to my earlier statement. The difference between a DB and a DC plan is who's bearing the risk. So the employee or is it the city? That's really what it boils down to.
So
Because you can create a retirement plan if investments work out that looks very much like a DB plan, and maybe it can be even better, as the mayor pointed out, if you have favorable returns and you're in for a long time. But if you've got some bad years or something happens, then the employees take that risk. And it's just who's going to assume the risk. Is what it boils down to.
So is it,
Dad, scroll up, will you?
Yeah.
Okay, right there, thank you.
Which one are you looking at, Chuck?
I'm looking at all of them.
Okay.
So this is total. There's roughly 500,000, okay, $400,000. Well, $430,000 on the difference in base. Is that total?
Well, it is down at the bottom. So the difference here,
30,000 over 20 years.
yeah, exactly. It's 30,000 over 20 years.
Okay.
But there's because you've got that bubble that comes through. That bubble that comes through.
But at the end of that 20 years, you have no more unfunded liability.
Right. It's this bubble right here because you've paid off a lot of the unfunded liability. Because they accelerate that. When you close a division to new hires, they accelerate paying off that unfunded liability, and then when you're out here 20 years or so, most of the people have retired, so there's really nobody there's nobody left to pay for really, and that eventually goes to zero. You're not paying anything more on that ED plan, and it's hopefully working out for the rest of the Americans.
so, in essence, if the council wanted to go to a defined contribution plan for this group only, it would cost for this group more for the next roughly 20 years, more city costs. But for those additional costs, you're going to eliminate that unfunded liability. And I want to make sure council understands that that's not eliminating our total unfunded liability to MERS, it's just for that
Group.
that division. We would still have unfunded liabilities for police, the 2 police units, fire, and steelworkers. And plus the general employees that are still in the DB.
And one thing to keep in mind too, if MERS does another experience study, which they do every 5 years, and they say, okay, now we think the rate of return really, instead of 7.75%, now we need to make it 7.5%. Because they're trying to be conservative too, right? That will have an impact. These calculations don't take that into consideration because they don't know that. They're saying that we're going to stick with a 7.75% rate of return. If MERS does that, that's going to tend to increase our costs. If they have good investment performance, though, it'll offset those costs. So, this is a snapshot and a picture, in time, and it's the best data that's available. But there, again, it's all an actuarial calculation, a lot of it's investment returns, and it moves. It's a moving thing, as we've seen over the past 6-7 years.
I would be in favor of moving towards a defined contribution plan, but I would also be in favor of a set contribution, a matching contribution, and then a 50% match contribution up to 8% of city funding. I would want to incentivize the employees to put money in and show them the advantage of putting additional resources in, because I believe the contributions to 401 and 457 are tax deferred, and a lot of the dollars, Mayor Pro Tem has pointed out, he was under defined contribution and benefit with the state. I was just under defined contribution. It actually only cost him about $5 a month, really, from his paycheck when he looked at the tax difference and such. When you put that money in and it's tax deferred, it's not costing you as many real dollars up front.
It would be a lot more than $5 a month here, but I agree with your incentivizing a program. So what we were contemplating, again, it'll depend if we do this and what council wants to do, but you can do a dollar for dollar match. So I like to think of it on percentage terms. If the employee puts in 1%, the city will match 1% up to whatever, 10%, 9%, 8%, whatever. It's just easy for the employees to understand. You can do it differently. Some people say, we're going to give you 5% no matter what, and then we'll match dollar for dollar up to a certain amount, or whatever, 3%. So there's different ways to structure it. That can all be handled.
So it's going to cost more.
Excuse me?
So it's going to cost more, in addition more, to give them the incentive. So it's going to cost us 7%, and then you're going to give them an additional 3% if they match 3%. So now it's going to cost us 10%.
What I'm saying is
But
if you structure it like that, yes, it would cost more. But if we were going to do this, we'd have a conversation as to what the maximum council wanted to pay was for sort of the plan.
And you get $3,000 a year average over 20 years to change the plan. Is that correct?
No, 1,500.
Say that again?
Is it going to cost us about $3,000 a year on average over the next 20 years?
Oh, I think it's about 1,500.
Oh, yeah. What he's looking at is this
Oh, the bottom.
$30,000.
30,000 divided by 20.
Yeah, about 1,500.
So just,
But
as Ed
we'll
said,
have no unfunded
well,
liability
and
for that department.
as Ed said, it's a policy decision. Do you want to spend more in the short term, at least for the next 20 years, and then have a break for a few years and then it goes back up? If you want to do that, the trade-off is you eliminate your unfunded liability in that division, okay? Or you stay the status quo and don't pay as much each year. So it's just whatever you want to
But
come
run
up
the risk of more unfunded liability.
with. Yeah, there's risks.
I think we all, I think I owe responsibility to my children, my great-grandchildren, to those people, the upcoming generations. I think I owe I feel responsible to them to do the best here, not continue to grow this unfunded liability. I don't see it stopping.
Well, it will eventually, because MERS forces you to pay off now the unfunded liability over a 20-year period. There's no longer an open-ended amortization. They're going to force you to pay that off over 20 years, even if you kept the division open.
Regardless of escalating fees.
Yeah, again, you've got to pay more to do that. That's how it gets done.
So how are some of those cities going to do that?
Well, that's what they're looking at, because because they recognize that that's an issue, and they realize that it's like, the policy that they had before, which works because it's a long, it's a perpetual time horizon, but they said, okay, we're going to put a time certain where you've got to have that actuarial unfunded accrued liability paid off, and so they're closing that period. So this model, it does that as well, and that's why you see on the number that drops off on the annual required and DD employer contribution, it drops off because it gets paid out. So it's, either way, you're going to pay off that unfunded liability at some point down the road. But a lot can happen over 20 years. What's the market going to do? What are salaries going to do? What's longevity going to do? All those things.
Well, if it's the council's consensus to move towards a DC for the non-general new hires. You know, if that is the consensus, then we can bring back some options on how we could do that.
I'd like to look at that.
I have nothing, I want nothing to do with that.
Okay? I just need to know the consensus.
I would like to
Say
get
no.
more information.
Do you want to see some more? Deb?
I'd like to take a look at it.
Councilman
So,
Bates?
so can I stop for you for just a
Yeah.
minute? Because let's be clear, when we bring something back to you, I mean, we're not gonna explore more options. You can explore options on what you're gonna fund on the DC plan. But to cut this off to new hires, it's, you pass a resolution and it's done. I mean, this is the numbers they provide, this is what they give you to help you make that
Yeah,
decision.
those aren't changed.
So there's not more information that can be given on the DB side of it to help you make that decision. You can structure the DC plan differently if you want, but that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and that's what I was referring to, is we can bring you some options on how we could structure, you know, how much the city contributes versus the employee and those kind of things.
And we're gonna look at different companies as well.
Well, I would, and Ed broached it earlier, I would strongly recommend that the city continues with MERS, defined benefit, and/or ICMA, because those are the industry standards in municipal government. And I can talk from experience. When I was in Alpena, even though we had a DB plan, you could have a deferred comp. And we had a plan. When I relocated, I couldn't contribute to that anymore because it was not offered at that community.
Well, could you take your money out and invest in a different plan?
I could, but, you know, it's to attract talent. If you can just do it seamlessly, it makes it a lot easier for a future employee. And if they're in a local unit of government, and if they're in a DC plan, most likely they're going to be involved with either MERS or ICMA.
But if they weren't, they could
And
still
they're
take their
all-
money out and go to the other plan.
You could, but it's just another obstacle. And that's the only reason I'm bringing that up.
It would be really helpful for staff if we could take a little bit of time and talk about what council would like to see. If the consensus is to move forward with the DC, and I'm sorry I interrupted.
I don't think we can get a majority, we're not going to get a consensus. Consensus is everybody agrees, so majority. Councilman
I'm
Bates?
still, I think I just need to see more math, I'm sorry, or more examples.
What math would be helpful, because I'm not sure what else it is I could show you.
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask this question. When I look at this baseline for the annual required DB employer contribution, is this is the contribution toward their pension portion, correct?
Right.
But it doesn't include the amount of the liability for the unfunded liability.
So this baseline annual required DB employer contribution, the first one to the left of the yellow, you can see that number goes up and it drops off in 2038 to $100,000. That's because you've paid off your unfunded liability at that point.
Okay, so that answers my question. In this baseline that says annual required DB employer contribution, the darker one, that's got to include the paying off the,
Yes, because they're forcing you to do that over a 20-year period.
okay.
Well, I'll probably kick myself for saying this, but it deeply saddens me to think that if I retired from this, an employee retired from the city and their pension is $100, that 30 years from now it's still $100 a month. That just seems wrong to me. There ought to be an escalator or something built into that, and maybe through this other plan, that could be a possibility to do that.
You can't build an escalator into it at DC.
But you can by investing, and the way you invest,
Well-
you can get some more money there.
You can invest more.
Possibly.
I mean, it's a choice, but
Yeah.
It's a choice now.
Yeah.
It's a choice now if people want to do that. But getting back to the matching, it would be really nice to get a consensus as to what council thought, or a feeling as to what council thought would be a maximum amount they would want to match or contribute.
And the numbers that Ed selected 7% as a maximum contribution on the city's behalf, is that realistic?
I've got some numbers I'll share with Mr. Bradford yourself, and anyone else.
Well, that's fine, but
I've got 6%, 7%, 8%.
Right.
The city used to do 7% for
Appreciation.
non-managers, and then the department heads, before, when they offered like a fixed contribution plan, and then it did, I think it was doing 11% for the department heads. So 7% I just picked as kind of probably a minimal. I mean, a lot of places when I've asked my peers and colleagues, they're doing 10%. So it depends. The numbers I ran were on 7%. 10% changes this, obviously it looks a little different. So it just depends. And as you saw in my slide, in order to make it match the DB plan, again, with all those assumptions, it's a 7% employer, 7% employee, so they're really putting in 15%. The city's not, but that's what it takes roughly to get a similar type of level.
But people aren't limited either. I mean,
You're limited to the
if I'm an employee, I can put 10% in against the city's 8%.
Right.
And that's,
But we're
to my
trying to determine
benefit,
what the
just
city's
accumulates at a greater rate.
Yeah.
We're trying to determine what the city's exposure wants to be, and that would be helpful.
Yeah, we just need to know, what do you, and we use 7% as a city contribution. Should we work from that assumption?
I'll work from an 8%.
Okay?
That's easily done. I mean, that's just what we're trying to get.
That's less than what we're doing on an average now.
Is 8%, is that,
That's fine with me.
City contribution.
I'm not sure that matches what, let's say you start working a job in your 30s, I'm not sure that matches what they feel that they can contribute. I mean, that's been my experience in business.
So at that point, then what the city can do is say, the city says, we can put in whatever the percentage is, pick a percentage, or we're gonna put in no matter what. Whether you put in 0 or $1 or $1,000, we're gonna give you this percent. And then once you hit that percent, then we'll match you dollar for dollar up to a certain percent. And there's different ways.
That's the way the state worked. The state gave
I
you
would
3%,
prefer-
period.
I would prefer something like that because I just know that young families starting out, they just don't feel like they can give that much up.
So
They start getting more serious when they
Throw
get
this out
40.
and see what this sounds like. The normal cost right now, and by normal cost, I mean what the typical ongoing recurring cost should be for this division without unfunded liabilities is just under 6%. So I think it would be perfectly reasonable to say the city's going to put in 5% regardless of whether the employees are paying anything or not, and then we'll match that dollar for dollar for everything that you put in above 5%. So if you put in 6, we'll put in an additional percent up to some level that the city caps out at. And then the employees can go above that if they want to.
Okay.
I mean, that's an option. But you can, it could be 4%, you can do it however you want. But we just need to have something so we can work from that. So if that sounds reasonable, we could do that.
Yes.
So 5% no matter what, and then a dollar for dollar up to 8% once you hit that 5%.
Or 50 cents on, something to incentivize people to put
Right.
money in there.
So we can come back with
50
something.
cents on the dollar up to a cap of 8%.
we'll bring it back, let you take a look.
I'd just like to see some more numbers. That's where I am.
So, but again, Linda, what numbers do you want to see? Maybe we need to take it offline because when you put numbers in a spreadsheet for a DC plan, there's so many variables that you
I
can
know.
alter, and the numbers get crazy because the time value of money accumulates so much. So the mayor said if somebody starts out at 25, then you have a 35-year time horizon. That makes a huge difference. Most of the employees that we've hired into this division recently are 40 or more. So,
Okay.
but with that said, they should have had some retirement savings in their first 20 years of their life.
Well, they're still going to get Social Security too.
Yeah, they're gonna have
So-
Social Security. So there's all those different variables that you have to figure in there. So, I mean, I'm happy to put together more numbers, but I just wanna make sure I'm giving you what you need.
Linda, it might be most beneficial if maybe you just came in and talked with Ed and
Sure.
he could probably run some
But
scenarios for you.
I do have just one small concern is I am a little bit worried about the popularity or the perceived popularity of the defined benefit versus being the better program than a defined contribution. So that does trouble me a little bit. So I don't know how do you really think that that's going to prevent people from wanting to work here?
I
The
can't say that
difference between the two of them?
unequivocally, but I do know that it's just human nature. If you have a choice between a place of employment that offers a DB versus a DC, you're probably most likely going to go to a DB.
But are you thinking more for like union-wise rather than a non-union?
Yeah, either one, union or not.
Because this is non,
I understand it's non-union, but there, where I, again, I hate to keep coming back to where I've been before, but even the non-union employees were offered defined benefit plans. And so, there is that's a threat. I don't know how real it is, I mean, how strong a threat it is, but that is a concern because if we look at trying to attract talent from another community and they have a DB, they may not be inclined to come to our community with a DC. I can't say that with all certainty, but that's
how
just a
many,
concern.
how many employees actually came from another DB? That is in this?
One, just two, the chief.
No, that's
myself.
non-union.
Well, that's
Chief.
one, two.
And I don't know about Angie, what she.
Well, I'll say this about Andrew. She did not have a DB plan where she came from. And that was part of the reason she was willing to come here for less money. It's because we had to.
Because I'm thinking as a, one that's not actually in a DB, and that there's a lot of companies out there that don't use this, but if they come from outside of a city or government-run employer, they wouldn't technically know a lot about the DB plan versus the DC plan.
Oh, and that's correct, but we can't always hire from the private sector for all of our positions. And it's just, there's some that we can't, but not all.
My research that I did today, I read about what employees look for when they look for a job. Retirement program for our younger people looking for jobs wasn't even asked. They didn't even care about it. When you get to be 30 or 40, that was a question that was asked, what is your retirement program? So I kind of take issue with the fact that we can't attract good people without having a defined benefit.
I'm not saying we can't, it's just another obstacle, potential obstacle for some people. That's all.
I would actually like to hear from the employee stance, what they would like, really. I know we're doing it through the city, but I'm actually asking for the employees to come and tell us what you guys like, and what you would, I mean, I know it doesn't affect them now, but what they would, if they would come.
Well, I'll give myself as an example. When I came to the city, I was planning on being here for maybe 3 years. I kind of looked at it as a stepping stone, but I really liked working for the city. And at that point in time, the DB plan became very attractive. I mean, and as you said, 20-year-olds may not think about that. 40-year-olds do, and we haven't hired a 20-year-old in the non-union division since I've been here. I mean, we're hiring more mature workers because we have the skills required to do the job are higher. You don't get those at entry level. You don't have entry level positions, really. So, again, everybody's different. You may have somebody who says, yeah, this clearly is just a stepping stone, and I want the portability, and I'll take it and run. And that's what a lot of younger people look at, but then you've got others that don't. So everybody's situation is a little bit different.
I mean,
But
for my
affordability
students-
is a two-way street too. Can we afford to continue the way we're going?
Absolutely.
Do we need to take a look at a different model? Because we need to continue our service, and we need to continue to do what we're doing. Do we need to change? And change is sometimes hard. I don't want anybody to lose any benefits, but I think there may be a better way of doing this and still come up.
And I don't think, because council has said they're not going to impose this upon existing employees, it's only going to be for new hires. I look at that as, for new employees, if this were to happen, it's a buyer beware situation. They know exactly what they're getting into when they hire in, right? So I mean, that's not a concern. They know what the situation is, and they either decide they want it or they don't.
We still have a retirement program, we still have a way of.
Well, Heather, since this would affect you if you were to hire, what would you like?
I'm very happy in the DB plan. But I also contribute to the ICMA, to the 457 separately myself also. I have both. but I'm very happy that I have a DB plan.
So it would- if we were to change this and you were.
If I was to leave to go somewhere else, if I had to move for whatever reason, I would be looking for a DB plan.
And can I get your input?
I can answer, I can answer that. I was coming here 3 years ago. If it weren't for the defined benefit program, I wouldn't be. Because we had the vesting, a time period to go through, and I knew that there was a pension at the end of it. Even though I brought 34 years of pension with me from Cat City, it was still the attraction of the knowing there was another pension at the end of that 8 years. And then on the flip side, see, where I came from, they had the defined contribution. They changed that some years ago. They went to that. Most employees are not investment savvy, and they're not going to do the investment to where they're going to make a big buck like Jim, like you did. They don't have that knowledge of it. They don't want to. They like to have someone taking care of it for them. And that's another thing I like about this too.
Well, as I understand it, that's what MERS does.
MERS, well, no.
Under the defined contribution also.
No, well, no, you have to pick and choose what you want. They put that, you have that responsibility to pick where you want your money's invested. They don't do it for you.
But they do have advisors that you can.
Yeah, advisors, yeah.
They do have age, they call them age funds now, so how many years are you out to retirement, and they have the appropriate asset allocation and what have you, so.
So then the question for me is, whose responsibility is it? Is it my responsibility as a taxpayer to make sure you have a retirement? Or is it the employee's responsibility to do what they can for the retirement? Where does that responsibility lie?
That's a very good question. We're in the public sector and you do have taxpayers. In the private sector, businesses offer retirement packages as part of their overall compensation. And a lot of private sector businesses don't have as rich of pension benefits, but they pay a lot more. And that's something to keep in mind. It's not necessarily true at the state level, where state employees, and especially in the higher levels, and federal employees are quite highly compensated. Plus, they get very good pension benefits. But in a lot of local communities, the pay is a lot less than what you would get at least for the higher level jobs in the private sector. And I know that for a fact because I work with several other private sector firms. So if you erode the pension benefit and you don't adjust salaries going down the road, then now you don't have much less attractive package. Are you still going to be able to hire people? Yeah, you are. But is it the caliber of people that you want running the city down the road? So you're saying is the taxpayer's obligation to pay for somebody's retirement. Probably not directly, but it's an employer's obligation if they want to offer a retirement plan to do so in a manner that they feel is treating employees fair and is helping their retention recruitment. If it's not affordable, they make adjustments, just as you've alluded to. But that's an employer decision as to what they need to attract the employees and what they want to have. And I'll give you an example. We talked about this before. The county has switched over from a defined benefit pension plan that was more generous than what the non-union staff had. They had a higher multiplier to a much less benefit than what we currently have in a hybrid plan, where it's got a lower multiplier and no match on the DC side of that hybrid. There's no employer match. And if you talk to the sheriff department, they can't get people because nobody's going to come there to work for that kind of retirement. I mean, so it's a little different. That's police. They don't get Social Security, all that. I get all that. There's differences there. But the bigger point is you have to be competitive at some level. And please don't think that I'm suggesting that a DC plan with a reasonable match isn't competitive, because it is. There's a lot of places don't even offer that. So that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying if you look, overall broad perspective, you just got to balance that out.
I know I come from a different perspective because I'm in my 30s. So, and if I didn't have, sorry. And if I didn't have my accounting degree and all, and I understood this stuff, people my age wouldn't really be knowing about this. And more so 401 would be, oh yeah, well, we'll do a 401 and getting paid more now rather than putting money in the pension seems to attract my age group. So it's different for
Perspectives changes. Like, as part of the research that I did leading up to this, there was a study by Vanguard, which is a huge firm, manages billions and billions of dollars. And this is a few years old, but at the time, the average 401k balance of all their accounts was like $100,000. but the median was $25,000. So you had some really huge accounts, because you have, I'm sure they had a lot of executives that have multi-million-dollar 401k accounts, but you've got if the median is only $25,000, you've got a whole lot of people that haven't saved a dime for retirement, even though it's available to them, or very little. And again, that's a personal choice. But if you look at the literature, what you're finding is there's going to be a coming retirement crisis. And it's going to get paid for one way or another, and probably will be a taxpayer bailout, because you're going to have people, they're not going to be able to do away with Social Security. They're probably going to have to increase it, because you're going to have a whole generation of people that haven't saved much for retirement. And they only are going to live on Social Security and very minimal savings. Again, that's their choice. They get that. It's a personal decision. But that is a crisis that's happening. And part of that is because 20 years ago, 30 years ago, in the 70s and 80s, when all these companies had pension plans, that was one of the three-legged stool, right? Social Security, pension, private savings. Well, that one leg has been kicked out. People aren't really wanting to save much on a after-tax basis, because they can't afford to live. They got to pay the rent, they got to pay the medical bills, so that's gone. So now you've got this little hinge of Social Security and maybe a firm that offers some kind of a minimal retirement plan. I mean, I'm looking at the big overall spectrum of that. So it's going to be challenging for employees moving forward. I'm not suggesting that's what the city is in, but that's overall, that's what the retirement landscape looks like.
We'll bring something back to council to take a look at in terms of funding levels.
But in the meantime, I would suggest the employees would reach out to us, give us your opinions of it as well. Because it affects everybody. So that would actually, for me anyways, would help.
Doesn't affect anybody that's employed now.
Well, no, but I mean, like, in the future, stance. If they were to come on
But
board now.
just as sure as Heather would say she wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. I tell you, I wouldn't take a city job if it was the defined contribution the way it is now. I'd go somewhere else. I mean, it's just not my strategy.
Right. But, I mean, we represent every other community here, so I would like your input as well. Just for the business.
And the taxpayer.
Right, no.
Okay. Our last agenda item, discussion on River Street refuse pickup.
Well, we had a local business owner that reached out and is concerned about the trash on River Street and the image it presents. And we have some, obviously I think council is aware we have some limitations, because a number of our buildings downtown, they don't have room for a dumpster on their property. They just can't, they don't have it. A recent example is TJ's. When they used to have their dumpster in the parking lot of the old drugstore, and they were asked to move it, and we ended up putting it in one of our lots on a temporary basis, and they were able to strike a deal with the new owner of the drugstore, so that problem was taken care of. So there's not a lot of options. They just don't have room for dumpsters. Some of the buildings do. So, what we need to hear from council is, some of the options that we've identified, and Tyler brought them up, were, optimally, and Tyler and I talked about this, ideally would be to have what I call dumpster corrals in our city parking lots, and then have common dumpsters that would be utilized by the business owners downtown that can't have a dumpster on site. I don't know how costly it is, but that's a cost. Another option would be to require all business owners to find some place for a container, and that all trash would have to be put in containers on River Street. And it would reduce the unsightly appearance. The other is changing the days that the trash is picked up, or just not allowing any trash on the sidewalk on River Street. Those are about the only things that we, Tyler and I have talked about that we can consider as options. So just interested in what direction council would like us to pursue. Or do we just leave it as is?
Tyler, would it be more beneficial to change just the days?
To change the
When
days?
the pickup is?
One of the reasons why we're talking about changing the days is because you get some businesses that aren't open on a Sunday. So they take the trash out Saturday night because their trash day is Monday. So then it's sitting out throughout the weekend. So you have visitors coming in and there's piles of trash. So we were thinking if it was Tuesday, they work Monday, they can put the trash out and that at least gets the trash out during the weekends.
I like that, we're trying to find something to put dumpster.
Well, there's places that they can't. One of the things I'm interested in is requiring that the trash has to be in some kind of a container.
I think that would be a benefit right there. You know, when you look at the situation that we had for TJ's, it was temporary, and then we got residents dumping stuff over there and overfilling the container because it's there. And I see corrals, if you don't have locked access. I see the same thing. I see people becoming aware and just start dumping all their household trash at those locations.
And the only way it'd be effective is if they were locked, and those,
Yes.
whatever business owners are assigned that has a key.
Had access to it.
And that would take care of the majority of our problems. The other one that Tyler and I really don't have a good answer to is the cardboard pickup. There's a lot of,
It picked up someone comes down River Street picking cardboard up on a pretty regular schedule.
right, but it is out there, and some could term it unsightly. So that's the one thing we haven't really worked with. But if the council is interested in requiring or eliminating any trash on the sidewalk on River Street unless it's in a container, that would have to be an ordinance that we'd have to adopt.
I would like that option. I know it does. It was, especially over the 4th, it was kind of unthinking, and I noticed it too. But having just bags of trash out there really needs to stop.
That's the only way we can get the bags off that is not going to inconvenience to a high degree those businesses that don't have room for a dumpster. That's about the only way that we could come up with. If that's the council direction, I can work with the city attorney on drafting some ordinance language.
I agree.
I think it'll look a lot better.
Then,
Won't have it that quick. We're
You
fast,
can.
but not that
you
fast.
can, no, you can.
I'm gonna be gone
Okay.
for a while. No, we can have that probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks. It just depends on when we can get the ordinance committee together and get Georgie drafted up. So we'll bring that back for council's consideration. But what I'm hearing is draft that ordinance eliminating trash bags on the street.
And are we even looking into changing the days?
I think that's a good
I would
idea.
change the date.
If it's gonna make it easier for them, then dang it, do it.
We just have to see if it works for Republic, and then that does mean that restaurants and stuff are gonna accumulate more trash before the trash pickup, because they go through the full weekend, but, I mean, no matter what you do, there's gonna be
I like,
an issue with something.
I like the idea of Tuesdays and Fridays, and trash not being able to put out until 8 p.m. the night before pickup. Because Sunday when you drive down River Street, there's bags of trash.
I'd like to see that ordinance applied to the city about putting garbage out, right? You'll see them put it out
Oh,
the
yeah.
day after the pickup and it'll sit there for a whole week. It's,
Well, I just want to make sure I'm hearing council clearly. You want the ordinance, the draft ordinance to review, and then,
Have a conversation with Republic, see if they're willing to even.
okay, so you want that instead of the ordinance? Or you want them both?
Do it.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
want to make sure we're.
That's where I'm at.
Okay.
And if they have a container, they can put their trash in the container Saturday night and then roll it out Monday morning.
Right. All right, we'll bring something back for council.
curious, with the beach bash this last Saturday, how did, which I'm not opposed to it, but how was the truck, that talk about truck, able to be down at the beach when the ordinance saying it can't be? 'Cause
It was part of the
Yeah,
special
the way,
event.
well, the way the ordinance reads, it says, if it's part of an event, city-approved event by city council, the food can be.
Alright, because I was wondering if they were open at the same time, and I don't know if the concession decided to stay open longer because of
Yeah,
that?
we had talked to the concession people before we even came with the event request to
They were okay.
council to make sure that they were okay with the food trucks.
I was just wondering if there was some kind of backlash because of that?
I haven't heard a thing.
I didn't hear anything.
The
Well,
only
the
thing I
taco
heard-
truck's generator was down for a little bit of the time.
The only thing I heard was the event was a overwhelming success.
Yeah.
I have a couple of things to add to the agenda real quick. How are we doing with the DNR, getting somebody from the DNR here?
I've got to check with Public Safety Director. I know he's assigned it to Sergeant Bruce. Sergeant Bruce is on vacation right now. I'm hoping that Tim's, the Public Safety Director has been off for a couple of days. He'll be back tomorrow. Hopefully he's got some kind of an update for us.
My second thing would be, it doesn't have to be answered tonight, but it's an upgrade to our Wi-Fi system at both beaches.
That's already,
Yeah, that's pretty much done.
How much did it cost and where did the money come from?
It came from a variety of budgets, and we don't have the final bills in yet, but it was about, I think, $250 for the devices that we needed, there's a couple mesh units, and then the labor to put the stuff, and we got a proposal from our vendor of record. I don't recall what that cost was, but it's coming out of the parks budget, and some of it's coming out of the computer equipment line item. So, one of the things that we needed to do with that is the antennas that were there were aging, and were actually starting to cause us some problems, so.
And this is for people who vacation here to use, is that what?
Well, it's for anybody.
Anybody that's there, but I mean,
It's an open network, so if the city resident goes down to the beach, they can log on and get wireless access. We've had wire Wi-Fi at the beaches for years. It's just time. Also, the other thing it does, Councilmember Zelinski, is it gives us the ability now to monitor for abuse more. So for example, because the technology was older, we couldn't necessarily see what devices were on it. But with this new system, you get a better indication. And so if somebody's got a Xbox at a residence that's able to get that signal and is logging on and, using up a lot of bandwidth, we can block them or throttle them. So
I know some residents that use it.
no, I've blocked 2 or 3 users that have devices.
So we monitor it pretty well.
We don't, I don't monitor it daily, but I go on and periodically check the logs, and IT Rate periodically goes on and sees who's been connecting and what have you. It goes through a separate firewall from the city and stuff, but it shares our main bandwidth, so it hasn't been a problem, and it's been very popular. We didn't have any complaints over the 4th at all, where we've had complaints in the past because it logged down, so I think it's a nice enhancement.
Do we promote that? Because I know I've had visitors come up and they're just really surprised, oh, there's internet on the beach. Do we actually promote that? Visit our
I don't know if
beaches?
it's on our website or not, but we could certainly
I
add
think that
that.
would-
And we could probably get some little like window cleans, that have a little Wi-Fi symbol on the beach, so.
Yeah. I think that would help attract people as well.
And one last thing before we call it a night, just want to let council know that starting tomorrow, DPW is going to replace the sidewalk on, outside the River Street doorway. That's, so that entrance is going to be closed for probably 3 days.
Water Street?
Right.
You said
Okay,
River
you said
Street.
River.
I thought it said water, I do know.
Well, river is part of water, so.
Jeff actually emailed me and said they're actually gonna be doing the cores on Friday and Monday.
Okay.
So it'll be, a few days, and they've got to remove the
They got-
slab and stuff.
But they're going to start tomorrow morning. We'll have signs, and there's already information on our website and on our Facebook page. And we're also going to make allowances for a pedestrian lane, so people that are walking on Water Street, they can go out. We're going to lose a couple of parking spots, but people have to be accommodating. So we'll get that done in the next couple of days and look a lot better out there.
And we don't have a date on when stuff's going to get fixed, right?
What's
For the video.
They were supposed to have given me an estimated install date this last week, and I didn't get one, so I emailed them again today and asked for that. So I know there's a little bit of lead time on the equipment, but hopefully I'll hear from them soon.
That's the only thing I had.
Anybody have anything else? Thoughts and prayers with Tom Blaster's family, longtime city police officer who passed away. Service to be held Wednesday at Thursday morning. 10 o'clock visitation at Oak Grove and 11 o'clock service. Appreciate it. Motion to adjourn?
Second.